The ash is inside her lungs. Not enough to kill her, not yet. Just enough to make every breath a decision. If she breathes too loud, then the dark outside finds her. If she breathes too shallow, then her body starts making its own noise. There is no safe option. She is pressed against a rock overhang on the South African coast. 6 other people are breathing beside her in the dark. The air smells of sulfur. The sky has not changed in 11 days. It just remained grey-purple. 3,000 kilometers away, a mountain the size of a small continent tore open. She does not know about the mountain. She does not know that the ash in her lungs crossed 3,000 kilometers of sky before it reached her. At this very moment, she doesn't know that she is one of maybe a few thousand people still alive on Earth. She knows only one thing: something has ended. She does not yet know if it has ended completely. First of all, know this: it wasn't a disaster that happened 74,000 years ago. Disasters come to an end. People put things back together. The world comes back. Toba ran a filter over all of humanity, and the question that should really bother you, the one that keeps population geneticists up at night, is not how anyone lived, it is why her. Why that coast? Why that stone? Why not the thousands of others who were just as human, just as capable, and just as deserving of tomorrow? There is no answer. That is exactly the point. The Toba caldera in North Sumatra did not erupt 74,000 years ago. Eruption is not a big enough word. It went off. The Toba volcano released 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the air over the course of about 2 weeks. This was the biggest volcanic event in 2.6 million years of Earth's history. 1 cubic kilometer of material came out of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Toba let out 2,800 times that, in 2 weeks. Sumatra stopped functioning as a living place within hours. The eruption did not destroy an island, it poisoned something no one could run from, the air itself. 3 to 6 billion tons of sulfur dioxide got into the stratosphere and mixed with water vapor to make sulfate aerosols. These aerosols didn't fall, they got bigger. A reflective chemical veil had covered the whole planet in just a few weeks, keeping solar radiation from reaching the surface. Temperatures around the world fell by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. In some parts of Asia and the Middle East, it can get as cold as 15 degrees. According to climate models from the University of Oxford, this lasted between 6 and 10 years. 6 to 10 years of winter, without a single month of summer. Forests all over South Asia, where Homo sapiens were moving from Africa, fell apart in just one growing season. The food web didn't fall apart slowly, it fell floor by floor, with each layer losing its base before it could react. Toba ash layers that are up to 6 meters thick have been found at archaeological sites all over India. There is almost no evidence of people living there for thousands of years on either side of those layers. People who moved through South Asia just stopped leaving behind signs because they no longer existed. Next, the water broke. Ash fall on the scale of Toba changes the chemistry of rivers and lakes, blocks sunlight from aquatic ecosystems, and makes freshwater dangerously alkaline. People who lived near rivers had to make a choice: drink and die slowly, or don't drink and die faster. The third rupture is the one that no climate model can fully explain, and it's the one that really hits you when you think about it. The sun is the center of every culture that has ever existed. Planting seasons calculated by light angles. Migration timing built around solar patterns. Predator behavior was tracked at dawn and dusk. Even today, in rooms with climate control and artificial light, your body still knows what time it is without you having to tell it. This is because circadian rhythms are so deeply ingrained in human biology. That system, which has been improved over hundreds of thousands of years, is based on one idea: that the sun always acts the same way. Toba got rid of that idea completely. For years, the aerosol veil cut down on the amount of sunlight that reached the surface. Not darkness, something worse. A permanent grey that looked like morning and never became anything else. The internal clock that all people on Earth had been using since before this species had a name stopped giving accurate information. People who had always known when to move, plant, hide and rest suddenly had no way to tell when to do any of those things. And that confusion, which built up over months and then years, was a kind of destruction that left no bones behind in the fossil record. Researchers, including Curtis Marian of Arizona State University, have found archaeological evidence at Pinnacle Point on the South African coast that shows people lived there continuously during the Toba period. The volcanic winter couldn't reach coastal ecosystems the same way it could reach inland ecosystems because it was supported by marine resources. The ocean helped keep the temperature from dropping too much. The shellfish kept making babies. While the rest of the world went hungry, the people at Pinnacle Point ate. They didn't know they would be the ones to live. They were just there. What followed was not heroic, not in any way history usually celebrates. Stanley Ambrose of the University of Illinois was the first to look at the genetic evidence, and it was made clearer through studies of ancient DNA. It tells a story that is much more uncomfortable than heroism. There are people alive today who are descendants of a group of people who lived 74,000 years ago and could fit inside a single modern sports stadium. Some estimates say there are between 3,000 and 10,000 people still alive. There is no debate about the genetic bottleneck itself. Every strand of DNA in every person on Earth has it written down. We are one of the large mammals with the least genetic diversity on Earth. There is more genetic diversity in African elephants than in all 8 billion people alive today. Every civilization, every language, every war and every song, and every act of love or cruelty in the entire recorded and unrecorded history of this species descended from a group small enough that you could have seen them all from a hillside. What did those survivors actually do? They ate what the ocean gave them. At Pinnacle Point and Blombos Cave, both on the South African coast, researchers found sustained shellfish harvesting, ochre processing, and heat-treated silkcrete tool production, all within the Toba survival window. These were not people making grand decisions about the future of the species. They were people eating mussels off rocks because mussels off rocks were what existed. Cold, grey, unglamorous work, prying shellfish from stone with fingers that were numb from a cold that should not have existed on this coast in this season. In the half-dark, they were grinding red ochre, not for art, not for a ceremony. The word culture seems too big for what it really was, just people trying to stay useful in a world that had stopped making sense. They were using a heat treatment method, so precise that it wouldn't be found again in Europe for another 60,000 years. They were pressing hot stone against silkcrete to sharpen tools, not because they were smart, because they had nothing else to do with their hands while they waited. Because a coast that fed them also kept them alive long enough for them to accidentally come up with new ideas. They had time because they survived. They had everything else because of time. Here is the information that changes everything. Mitochondrial DNA analysis passed through the maternal line shows that all non-African people alive today are descended from a single migration out of Africa that happened between 60,000 and 70,000 years ago, after Toba. Not before. The people who lived in South Asia before the eruption, and whose remains are now buried under 6 meters of ash, left no genetic trace in any living human population. They either lived through Toba, or they didn't. In either case, they are not inside you. The people in you left Africa after the sky had cleared, after the bottleneck had already taken place. You do not descend from the ones who faced the worst of it. You descend from the ones who came after, who walked into a world still scarred, still cold, still chemically wrong, and kept moving. If worlds like this fascinate you, every Tuesday and Friday, Lifonix rebuilds a lost world of prehistoric Earth. Subscribe so no episode passes you by. The filter did not select for the best. It selected for the placed. For the ones who happen to be standing on a specific coastline, eating a specific food source when the sky decided to close. Sit with that. There is nothing comfortable in it. Real survivor guilt isn't about feeling bad that you lived when others didn't. It is the very specific feeling of vertigo that comes from realizing that you didn't need to be good to exist. The woman in the ash at the beginning of this story didn't survive because she was smarter, stronger, or more deserving than the thousands who didn't make it through the volcanic winter. Because her coast was 2 degrees warmer than the inside. Because the shellfish kept having babies in water that the ash couldn't get to. You are here because of her, not because of what she did, because of where she was. A woman whose name is lost forever and ever lived under a certain rock on a certain coast 74,000 years ago. She was the reason everyone you have ever loved is alive. Every single thought you've ever had. You wake up every morning. Every moment that felt earned, chosen, or deserved was built on a foundation that was never chosen. She didn't choose to save the future. She made the choice to stay out of the rain. She made the choice to keep the people next to her quiet for one more night. Little choices, normal choices, the kind you make without realizing how important they are. They were more important than anything anyone has done since. Just a coastline. Just a rock overhang. Just ash that was slightly thinner here than it was 300 kilometers north. Subscribe to Lifonix, new documentary every Tuesday and Friday. But this is only half the story. Next Friday, for millions of years, the ocean belonged to one predator. 60 tons of jaw and cartilage, a bite force no animal before or since has matched. It hunted whales precisely and without mercy. Then the whales changed. They grew larger. They grew faster. They started fighting back. And Megalodon, the most successful marine predator in Earth's entire history, started losing. Next Friday, on Lifonix, the hunt that ended the hunter.